I used to come to the cafe because it was quiet. Not silent, quiet. The kind where you could still hear the hum of the espresso machine and the clink of cups, but it never felt like anyone was trying too hard to fill the air. She was part of that sound. The scrape of her chair, the low timbre of her voice when she ordered tea, the soft sound of pages turning. Always tea, never coffee. I noticed that before I ever learned her name. The first time we spoke, it wasn't anything special. She asked if I could plug her charger into the wall behind my table. My hand brushed hers when I passed it back. Warm, brief. She smiled like she was used to being polite but not used to being seen. Thanks, she said. You always sit here. I shrugged. Habit. She nodded like she understood more than the word. That's how it started. Little nothings, weather talk, book covers, the cafe's new playlist. Over a few weeks, I learned that she taught literature at the university a few blocks away. She'd grade papers here sometimes, her pen clicking in rhythm with the rain outside. I'd sit across the room pretending to read. But mostly I'd watch the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, or how she'd touch her ring finger without realizing it. There was no ring, just the habit. She remembered my order once. Double espresso, no sugar, right? I didn't even think she'd noticed. Yeah, I said, and my voice cracked a little. Her mouth lifted at the corner. You look like someone who'd like things straightforward. I didn't know what to say, so I folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares until it disappeared under my thumb. She laughed quietly. There's a difference between loneliness and being alone. I'd been alone for years. In my rented apartment, in my part-time jobs, in the noise I made to fill space. But loneliness feels different when someone suddenly sees it. Not out loud, just in how they look at you a second too long before looking away. That was her. Sometimes she'd sit across from me if the cafe was full. Mind if I share? She'd ask, even though she already knew I didn't. I'd nod, pretending to keep reading. But I'd count the seconds before she'd say something. Usually, she didn't. Silence with her felt clean, like breathing after rain. Once, when she was grading papers, she sighed and said, "They keep writing about love like it's something they can describe." I looked up. Maybe they've never had to hide it. She glanced at me. Her pen stopped midair. And then, softly, she said, "Maybe." The clock above the counter ticked a little too loudly. I wanted to ask her something. Anything. But the moment folded in on itself. She packed up her papers soon after. I thought she'd left, but when I stepped outside she was there by the door, pulling her scarf tighter. "Cold?" I asked. She smiled. But not at me. "Just late." She started walking, and for a second I almost said something stupid, like "see you tomorrow." But it wasn't that kind of thing. It wasn't planned. That night I stared at my phone longer than I should have. I typed, "You left your pen here," even though she hadn't, then deleted it. An hour later, a message buzzed. Unknown number. "You always sit by the window, right?" I looked at the screen for a long time before typing back, "Habit." No reply came after that. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. The message stayed unanswered. But she came back the next afternoon. Same seat, same tea, no mention of it. I almost laughed at the silence, how it made everything louder. The scrape of her chair, the faint tap of her nails against the cup, my pulse. She glanced at me once. "You look tired. Didn't sleep much. Working late. Thinking late." That earned a small knowing smile. She had those, the kind that said she'd been there too. Maybe years ago, maybe just last night. After a while, she slid a book across the table. "Carver, the cover was worn. You should read this," she said. "He writes about people who almost say what they mean." I thought that was everyone. Most people never realize they almost said it. Her words landed somewhere deep, where they lingered too long. I flipped the book open to the first page. Her handwriting was in the margins, underlined phrases, small thoughts. "Loneliness is what happens when you stop pretending you're fine." I wanted to ask about that line. Instead, I asked, "How long have you been teaching?" "Long enough to see patterns repeat. People don't change much. Just the reasons they give. Like saying it's about timing," she said. Then quieter, "Never really is." I didn't push. She looked tired in a different way today. Not from sleep, but from remembering something she hadn't meant to. Her fingers worried the edge of her scarf. I watched her thumb trace the frayed thread until it almost unraveled. Sorry, she said suddenly. That got heavier than I meant. It's fine, I said. You can talk. I don't mind. She looked at me like that was a dangerous thing to offer. Later, when she stood to leave, she paused beside my chair. You work here too, don't you? I saw you fixing that shelf the other day. Yeah, maintenance. Helps with tuition. She hesitated, then said, My office window sticks. The old frame's warped. If you ever have time. I nodded. Sure. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, I'll leave the light on. That night, I lay awake replaying it. I'll leave the light on. It sounded casual, but it didn't feel that way. The next evening, I found myself standing in her office doorway with a screwdriver and no real plan. Papers were scattered across her desk, soft jazz playing from her laptop. She was sitting on the edge of the desk, glasses low on her nose, pen tapping against her knee. You actually came, she said. Didn't want the window to stay stuck. Her smile broke into something quieter. I suppose we all have something stuck. I worked on the window in silence. She stood close, holding the frame steady. Her hand brushed mine, not by accident this time. Neither of us moved away. For a moment I heard nothing, not the music, not the city outside. Just the soft rhythm of two people not naming something that had already started. Later, walking home, I realized my hand still felt the warmth of hers. And I thought, I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe, because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't see her for a week. The cafe felt wrong without her. Like someone had turned down the color. I still sat by the window, still ordered the same espresso. Still pretended not to look at the door every time it opened. When she finally walked in, something in her had shifted. A slower walk, a quieter kind of quiet. Hi, I said, too quickly. She smiled polite. Hi. I waited for her to sit, but she didn't. Instead, she ordered her tea, waited for it, and turned toward the corner table near the wall. The one she never chose before. I almost let her, almost. But I got up. Did I do something? I asked softly. Her fingers tightened around the cup's edge. No, you didn't. Then. It's fine. She forced a smile that didn't fit. You don't have to worry about me. That word, worry, made my stomach twist. It sounded like distance disguised as kindness. I sat anyway, across from her. For a while, we said nothing. Just the sound of the spoon stirring her tea, her hand moving in small circles. The clock above us ticked louder than usual. Finally, she said, I shouldn't have asked you to come by the office. You needed help with the window. Her eyes met mine. That's not what I needed, was it? I didn't know how to answer. Before I could, someone called her name. A man in his 50s, gray at the temples, holding a folder, faculty badge clipped to his coat. She stood quickly, setting her tea down. Dean Walker, I didn't expect. He nodded at me, curious. Student, maintenance, I said before she could speak. He smiled too warmly. Of course. Always good to see initiative. They talked for a minute. Small academic talk, a grant proposal, a deadline, while I sat there, invisible and burning. When he left, she didn't sit down again. I should go, she said quietly. You're avoiding me. I'm trying not to, she whispered, voice almost trembling. That's the problem. Outside, it was raining again. She stood under the awning, the steam from her tea ghosting between us. I don't know what this is, I said. Neither do I. But you feel it. She closed her eyes. That's exactly why I shouldn't. Her hand lifted. For a second I thought she'd touch me. Instead, she brushed a raindrop from her sleeve, eyes still on mine. The air between us felt too full, like it might spill over if either of us breathed too loudly. Then she stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, faint and warm, like cedar and something sweet. Her lips parted, not to speak. Just a quiet, involuntary movement. And then she bit her lip, looked up at me, and said, almost a whisper, Tell me you don't feel it too. But before I could answer, she turned and walked into the rain. She didn't come to the cafe anymore. I told myself it was better that way, that space would help. But it didn't. It just made everything louder inside my head. One evening, as I was leaving campus, I saw her sitting alone on a bench near the faculty garden. No tea this time, no books. Just her, in a gray coat, staring at the lamplight on the pavement. I almost kept walking. Almost. Window still working? I asked. She smiled faintly. You fixed it too well. Now it doesn't close all the way. I can come by again. I know. She said it softly, like she was both inviting and refusing at once. I sat down, not too close. A cold wind passed between us. She pulled her coat tighter. I heard you're not teaching next term, I said. Her brow lifted. Word travels fast. Why? She hesitated. Sabbatical. Needed time. To get away from students like me. She turned then, not angry, just tired. Don't do that. Do what? Make this sound smaller than it is. I looked down. My hands were clenched without me realizing. I opened them slowly. I'm not trying to make it small, I said. I just don't know what this is anymore. Her breath caught. Neither do I. That's what scares me. We sat in silence for a while, just the sound of leaves scraping across stone. Her scarf slipped from her shoulder. I reached to fix it, then stopped halfway. She didn't move away. People will talk, she said. They already do, I murmured. She laughed quietly. One small exhale that sounded more like surrender than amusement. You think I haven't noticed the looks? The questions? I've been here before. When I was your age, it was someone else. Someone older. And I thought it meant something. I watched her fingers tremble slightly as she brushed hair from her face. Did it? Until it didn't. Her honesty hit harder than any rejection. It wasn't cruel, just real. She looked at me then, really looked, and said, You make me forget I'm supposed to know better. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The light above us flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said. I know. That's what makes it worse. The air felt charged, almost electric, though neither of us had touched. Her gaze dropped to my hand resting between us on the bench. Slowly she turned hers over, palm open, inches away. I could have reached out. Closed the distance. Said something reckless and real. Instead I asked, if I said it, if I told you what this feels like, would you stay? She didn't answer. But the way she looked at me then, that soft, frightened half smile, it was enough to know she wanted to. And that was somehow harder than hearing no. I didn't see her after that night on the bench. A week passed. Then another. The cafe window reflected only me again. Coffee cooling untouched, the seat across from mine still pulled slightly out, like she'd only stepped away for a moment. Like she didn't come back. I told myself she was busy. Papers, deadlines, sabbatical prep. But the lie didn't hold long. I knew her rhythms too well. The days she graded, the hours she liked her tea, even the book she'd leave half open on purpose, like she was saving her place in the world. And then one evening, when I was fixing a light fixture near the faculty offices, I saw her through the window. She wasn't alone. A man, the same one from the cafe, sat across from her desk, Dean Walker. He was smiling, talking with his hands. She was laughing softly, the kind of laugh I'd never heard from her before, light, practiced, the sound of someone remembering how to perform being fine. Something in my chest twisted. Not jealousy exactly, just displacement. She noticed me through the glass. For a second our eyes met, then she looked away. Not in guilt, just in decision. I left before they finished talking. That night I started a message. Deleted it, started again. Did I imagine it? Did I cross a line? Should I have said it when I had the chance? None of them sounded right. I deleted everything and stared at the empty screen until the light from my phone dimmed to black. The next morning, she sent a message first. Thank you for fixing the window. No greeting. No name, no warmth. Just a period at the end, like a closed door. I typed back, you're welcome, never hit send. After that, I stopped going to the cafe. The window seat stayed empty, the espresso machine too loud. I started taking the long route home, through the park, past her building. Not to see her, just to walk where I used to feel something start. A few times I thought I saw her. A glimpse of her coat in a crowd, the curve of her hair catching light near the crosswalk. But it was always someone else. Days blurred. I tried to convince myself that what we had, whatever it was, didn't need to end because it never officially began. That sounded cleaner than saying I missed her. But some nights, I'd catch myself scrolling through my messages, thumb hovering over her name, heartbeat sensing with hesitation. The sentence always ended the same way: draft saved. Never sent. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when I saw her again, near closing time at the cafe. She was standing at the counter, waiting for her order, hair damp from rain. The place was almost empty. The barista was wiping down tables. A song I didn't recognize hummed through the speakers. She looked up, saw me, froze just long enough to make it real. Then, the smallest smile. "You still sit by the window." "Habit," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant. We stood there, two people pretending to be casual in a place that used to belong to both of us. When she got her tea, she didn't leave. She walked over, set it down on the edge of my table, and asked, "Can I?" I nodded. The rain tapped against the glass. Steam rose between us. Neither of us touched our drinks. "You stop coming," she said. "You stop being here." A small laugh, almost a sigh. "Fair." She looked tired, not in the usual way. "Tired from carrying too many unspoken things," I said. "I saw you with him." Her eyes didn't flinch. "He's an old friend. Nothing else." I didn't think it was nothing. "That's the problem," she said, and the words landed soft but final. Silence stretched. I counted the seconds by the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Finally she spoke. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you reminded me of someone. Someone from when I was younger." He had the same way of listening. I think I wanted to go back there for a while, just to feel like I hadn't missed so much time. "And me. You made me feel seen." "Too much, maybe." Her voice cracked a little at the end, and she looked away, blinking too quickly. I wanted to reach out, but my hand stayed still on the table. "I wasn't trying to fix you," I said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "That's what scared me." We both smiled then, a tired, honest smile. The kind that knew what couldn't be unsaid. I said, "If I tell you that I still think about that night on the bench, does it make things worse?" She looked at me for a long time, then said, "No, it makes it real." The clock clicked over to closing. The barista flipped the sign on the door. She stood, slowly wrapping her scarf. "You should finish your coffee. It's cold." Her hand brushed my shoulder, brief, grounding. I stood too. For a second, we were close again, the same quiet, impossible distance between wanting and knowing better. Neither of us said goodbye. As she stepped toward the door, I called after her, "Would you stay if I asked?" She paused, hand on the handle. Then, without turning around, said softly, "Don't ask." And somehow, that was enough. Just before she left, she glanced back and smiled. Not with regret, not with longing, just a kind of peace. I nodded. "Okay." It's been almost a year since that night. The cafe has changed, new chairs, brighter lights, louder music. But at 8:47 a.m., when the morning rush softens and the city hums just outside the glass, it still feels the same. I sit by the window again. Habit. Always the same order, black coffee, no sugar. Sometimes she comes in, sometimes she doesn't. That used to matter more. Now it just feels like part of the rhythm. Some mornings start with her, some don't. Today, she does. She walks in wearing that same gray coat, hair a little shorter, smile a little steadier. The barista knows her by now. Green tea, 2 sugars. She glances toward my table before she even gets her cup. I lift my hand slightly, an unspoken hi. She tilts her head, that quiet acknowledgement that's become ours. She sits across from me, like it's the most natural thing in the world. "Still coffee," she says. "Still tea," I reply. We smile, not because it's funny, but because it's real. There's no tension anymore. The air between us isn't heavy, just warm. We talk about small things: her new class, my job, the book I still haven't finished. Every now and then, the conversation drifts, pauses. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. She asks, "Do you ever think about that night? The one on the bench?" "Sometimes," I admit. "Mostly how cold it was." She laughs softly. "And how quiet." "Yeah," I say. "Too quiet. We don't talk about what almost happened. We don't need to. That moment still lives between us, softened now, not sharp anymore. Something we both carry, but no longer have to protect." She looks out the window, watching the rain start to gather on the glass. "You fixed that window too well," she murmurs half to herself. "I know," I say. "It never did close all the way." Her eyes meet mine, gentle, knowing. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. The clock above the counter clicks to 8:47. Our old time. She notices it too. We both laugh, Quiet, shared, unspoken understanding. And then she does something small but certain. She reaches across the table, her fingers brushing mine, not by accident this time. No hesitation, just a simple, human connection. Neither of us says the word love, it doesn't need saying, it's in the way she looks at me, steady, familiar, peaceful. Outside the rain starts to slow, inside our cups grow cold again the way they used to, but we stay, for once, nothing feels unfinished. I think about that line she said once. About people almost saying what they mean. Maybe the trick isn't to say it. Maybe it's to stay long enough that you don't have to.